Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast, dedicated to raising awareness, sharing IBD stories, and offering support for those with Crohn's and colitis. Together, we can share knowledge, experiences, and help show the world the many faces of IBD. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Gish, Crohn's warrior since 2006 and lifelong fitness fanatic. My guest today is Trevor Zabar, who is the founder of Crohn's Crusaders and the author of the upcoming book, Crohn's Crusaders Secrets. Trevor battled Crohn's disease for 35 years until he was able to find healing through the gut and microbiome. He became so passionate about gut health that he quit his career in criminal justice to focus on nutrition and the microbiome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Trevor, and welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
So before we jump into talking about the gut microbiome, which is actually one of my favorite topics and it just fascinates me so much, but before we do that, why don't you go ahead and start by sharing your Crohn's story?
Absolutely, I'd love to. My story starts in Calgary, Alberta. That's where I was born. And I was actually born premature, and I was pretty much sick most of my life, starting as a kid. I found out later. We used to go to Banff National Park in Alberta all the time. I found out later that I got a pathogen from the water called Giardia, and that kind of stuck with me through my entire life. Although I didn't really notice this because it wasn't something we knew to look into it further at the time, to kind of have to try to kill it with different antibiotics. So it was just kind of in my system. They weren't really sure what was going on with me. And I just was in and out of the hospital as a kid all the time, always sick. We moved to Toronto when I was about 5, and it kind of continued. Always sick, always underweight. And pretty much my family's really healthy. I have a brother. I think he's been to the hospital one time. My dad's been to the hospital one time, and my mom's really healthy as well. So it was unusual, pretty much for our family for me to be so sick all the time. And that just kind of continued all through my young childhood. Then we moved to Florida when I was about 12, 13 years old. And that's kind of when all my symptoms started getting really, really bad. And for the next few years, it was in and out the hospital, surgery, all the standard medications. And that just kind of continued all through my teens, all through my 20s. And it was a struggle, as many of you guys know that have any type of IBD. It is a silent battle. Many people, actually most people, can't really relate to what's going on with us. So a lot of times we just kind of hide symptoms and just kind of push through it. And eventually, one of two things happen. We either go to the hospital, the ER, or we're kind of forced to go in due to something extreme happening, and we need surgery. And that's kind of where I was at. I was just kind of pushing through life here in 2007, finishing up school, and I graduated and I got done. I was doing an internship with Target. I was also working with the Orlando City Police Department, and everything was going good. I was just really struggling with my health, but I figured once I would be done with school, then things will start to look up and I can kind of get stable. I'll have more money, things like that. So I was kind of excited. My career was starting to take off. I got offered a job with Target. I got recognized by the city of Orlando. I got an award from the chief of police, a good citizenship award. And at the same time, I also got recommended to the FBI. And I was super happy. It was kind of life goal of mine. And I kind of forgot when I was a kid, I tried to get into the Army and went through the entire process. And in the last section of testing, I got disqualified for the Crohn's disease. And I guess I just kind of forgot about that. And when this happened with the FBI, I thought, okay, great. We'll be able to get in. I know I had a rough life so far, but things are looking up. Well, I started going through the process, and again, I got disqualified. And that's kind of been a pattern for me, not being able to take opportunities that I like, or just struggling to get stable and have a lot of the opportunities that other people have.
And had you ever found remission during all those years as you were growing up and being a teenager and getting a little bit older? Did you ever find remission, and were the doctors able to help at all? Put you on medications, off medications?
Yeah, I never really was in remission at any point in my
Mm-hmm.
life. I was always in a flare. It would just go from like a flare, just being sick all the time, to an extreme flare. And
Mm-hmm.
that happened, it seemed like every 3 or 4 months. But when I was getting diagnosed with Crohn's disease, the doctors really didn't know even really what Crohn's was and how to diagnose it. I remember I woke up one morning in the hospital room and I had like 8 doctors around me, and they all have their pads and they're all talking to each other, trying to figure it out. And at that time they said, "Oh, maybe we should put him on antibiotic on penicillin shots, and maybe he has rheumatoid arthritis, and maybe he has all sorts of different things." But I did start taking some of the Crohn's disease medication like Pentasa, Asacol, things like that didn't really work for me. So they moved up to things like Remicade and Humira, and they did work for a little bit of time. But with all those infusions that I used to get, like once a month, or the injections, after time they just stopped working and it just kind of wore off. And then I started looking at natural stuff, and I went to the natural doctor, and I had the blood allergy test. I took the food intolerance test, and it told me I was allergic to a lot of stuff. But they put me on enzymes and they would put me on different protocols, and I felt like I was getting close the natural way, but I just couldn't get there. And I kind
Mm-hmm.
of just got fed up with the natural way and went back to trying to get help from my doctor. And it was just a pattern, healthy, sick, healthy, sick, healthy, sick. Um, but what eventually happened to me was in 2012 when I ended up getting even sick, even more sick again, having to quit my job, move back to Florida, move back in with my parents. I was in the ER, and my doctor said, Trevor, you pretty much have no choice now. We have to do the J pouch surgery. We've done everything. We've given you every medication. You're just not responding. Your only other option is to take a trial, which you could possibly get the placebo. And at that point, I didn't really want to risk my life. Again, I felt like either
Mm-hmm.
my life was either going to get fixed and I'd figure this out, or it'd be a continued cycle that would just continue going. So what I did is I just told my doctor that, listen, I just can't keep going this way. I need to get a hold of my life. So I'm going to try to figure it out. And if I can't, I'll just come back and see you. And that's pretty much what happened. I just invested in my health and then found about
Mm-hmm.
the microbiome, and then it started going that way.
So tell me a little bit about that journey because I find it really interesting and amazing because you had obviously had these dreams of sounds like trying to join the army, sounds like you were interested in the FBI, but you kept getting disqualified because of Crohn's, but you actually went into criminal justice. So tell me a little bit about that journey from being sick, you're frustrated with your health, you have a career in criminal justice, and now that is completely, you've done a 180 and you've gone in a whole different direction, and you're now talking about and studying the microbiome and doing some amazing things with gut research and looking into that. So tell me about that journey.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We go through things at times, and we ask why are we going through these things, and it just seems like it's just you're really being tested and you're getting pushed, and we look back on things and we realize why they happened, and that's kind of where I'm at with mine. So basically,
Mhm.
what happened with me was I was really just tired of the cycle. I would get my life in order. This the last time, I finished with school, my career was taken off. I was doing great things. I was working at the museum, even meeting like celebrities, like Prince, giving them private tours for like 3 hours,
Mhm.
talking to them about stuff. And so, anyways, I just wanted to get my a stability in my life, just some stability. So I made a call, and my choice was to not have the surgery. My doctor at the time was one of the top doctors in the southeast for Crohn's disease, so was ranked top 100 in the nation as a physician. Really good guy, and I really felt like he knew what he was doing, but it's just so complicated. I felt at the time the disease. There's so much information out there. I'd see something on the internet, I would try it, but it's really hard to take something you see, try it, and make it work. So what I did is instead of just looking for things on the internet and this person did that, and just something that's kind of out there, I went into the scientific community, And I started looking at medical journals and papers and case studies and clinical trials. And I started looking at the like scientific ways to get better and just looking to see what was out there in the scientific world. And one of the first things that caught my attention was an antibiotic therapy trial that coincidentally my doctor at the time was the one that authored, and it had 2 years of research. Basically, 44 people out of the 44, 42 were still in remission after 2 years. And, that was great. I was like, wow, that's awesome. 2 years remission. That'd be longer than I've been in remission my entire life. So I started looking at that, and specifically, I went to him to try to get those different antibiotics that I've really never taken before to try to jumpstart this process. And it took a while for him to give them to me, like we were discussing earlier. And he did give them to me eventually. And then the next day, I got a letter to my house saying I was discharged from his practice, which totally caught me off surprise. But which I do understand, there's a lot of liability there. I'm experimenting on myself. He's
Yeah.
one of the top doctors. So, at the time, I didn't really understand as I do now. Just like the way I felt about doctors then is different now. Time kind
Hmm.
of shows you some things.
We get
So
wiser as we get older.
oh, definitely, definitely. So yeah, so I started taking antibiotics, and I did that for about 2 months. 2 months, and my body was feeling better. I was definitely feeling better, but I wasn't feeling better. I don't know if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
So, like the Crohn symptoms weren't as bad, inflammation in my joints and stuff, but just my body, just in general, I just wasn't getting better. And I realized that, hey, this isn't sustainable. Like, I can't continue to take antibiotics for the rest of my life. I have to find something else. So I dove back into scientific community and I started studying, looking to see what I could find. And that's when I came across the microbiome and gut health. And there wasn't really too much out there on it. It was sort of more like a myth. But at that point, you know, I was looking at anything. I was desperate. I just wanted to get my life back.
And this was around 2007 time frame?
No, this wasn't. This one now was in 2013, 2012,
Okay.
2013. So I
Hmm.
went back in 2012 to Florida after I quit my job, and I was just so sick, and I couldn't work. It got to the point, before I went to the ER, and I started going through, all this experiments and stuff. I went from like 180 to 120. I couldn't walk. I couldn't eat. It was bad, and then
Hmm.
that time I started trying to figure all this stuff out. I was forced to go on disability. I have two little girls, and I couldn't work. And for a lot of my life, people have told me to go on disability, but for me, being on disability is like the last resort. Like if I have no choice and I can't work, then I'll go on disability. But I have any choice, any chance to work, I'll go work. That's just kind of how I am. Um,
Hmm.
and so this was now about 2013, and I started finding stuff on gut health. And there really, like I said, wasn't much out there. Now it's kind of getting more mainstream, and a lot of people have heard of the
Hmm.
microbiome.
But even now it's still new now. So
Yeah,
five,
that's
6 years
right.
ago there was far less.
Definitely. So it was hard to, find people and talk about this with, and so it was kind of a solo journey for me. Even my doctor, he never even, this is nothing he's heard of as well. So I just kind of started digging in, and I came across probiotics. So I started studying those, and I said, okay, so this kind of makes sense. I have this gut ecology. I have good and bad bacteria. If I can alter my gut ecology, then maybe I can alter my disease state. So I jumped into probiotics, and just like many of you, I didn't know which probiotic pills to buy.
Hmm.
Refrigerated, non-refrigerated, 15 billion, 2 billion, Garden of Life. I just didn't know. So
Hmm.
I just started doing some more research and started taking the probiotic pills. And what I found with the probiotic pills is probably something that most people have found experience, and it's probably a reason why they're not mainstream right now. When I started taking the pills, I started getting much more sick, and
Hmm.
it was confusing to me. Then, like, why would I get more sick? These are essential bacteria. This is what I have in my gut. Why is it not working? And what I realized, over some time now, was that I was just putting too much healthy bacteria into my body. So
Hmm.
my my ecology was off at the time. So I definitely had way more bad bacteria than good. And that's what was causing the issues, I thought, at the time as I'm going through this. And so basically, the pills, when I took them in, ingested them, and put them to my body, it just loaded me up with way more, much more healthy bacteria. So that was, again, altering my gut ecology and throwing it off. And my body just like, oh, what's going on? This isn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So I got more sick. So I said, okay, well, maybe I can find this stuff in food form. And then I started researching. I came across kimchi, sauerkraut. So I was like, okay, awesome. I got me some sauerkraut. I went to Whole Foods, got some sauerkraut. I started hitting that really
Mm-hmm.
hard. Well, I got even more sick. And I was like, oh, how am I getting more sick? And, this is food. I was taking pills. And what I learned is that Whole Foods with probiotics have much more in them, content, than the probiotic pills. So one example for reference is a bottle of sauerkraut has about the same as has about the same healthy bacteria in it as 8 bottles of probiotics.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it's really powerful stuff. So we have to be careful how we take it. And I really didn't know that exactly how to take it, and it's hard with food to take it slowly. So I
Yeah.
kept looking and looking and researching and researching and researching, and I came across something called kefir, and
Mm-hmm.
I never heard of it before. Nobody I knew had heard of it, and I started doing more research on it, and I found that in Russia they would give the army kefir before they go to war to keep their immune system strong, and that's really what really kind of ignited me using kefir. Just I kind of lean on Eastern Europe for health. I feel like they have healthier countries over there. They just do things better than us as
Mm-hmm.
far as health goes. Um, but I wasn't really sure how I was going to take it and where I would find it, and what's a good brand, what's not a good brand. And the more research I did, I found that that actually was used in pretty much every part of the world through each culture's history. And
Mm-hmm.
and the fermented milk, it's amazing. Like in different parts of the world, they have different names for it. So in like Asia, Africa, India, they call it Yakult or Sharota. Not sure if you
Mm-hmm.
heard of that. Um, and then in Northern Europe, they call it Skier. In um, Eastern Europe, they call it Kefir. In the Middle East, they call it Dug. In Latin Central America, they call it Valgueros. They have so many names. In like
Yeah.
Morocco, they call it Labna, but it's all the same thing. It's a fermented milk that has, you know, amazing health benefits for you, and it's made with the kefir grains. And what's interesting enough is I was doing all this research back then, and I couldn't find out anywhere where the grains came from. They're just myths that they came
Yeah.
from the Prophet Muhammad. There's nothing concrete about these at all, and there's really no explanation for these grains, which is just you know something else, to be honest with you.
It is, and that's something I really find interesting too, because for a few years there, I was making my own sauerkraut. I actually made my own kefir, however you say it. But I'd gotten some grains, and then I'd started fermenting my own milk. But just like you, I was trying to figure out where these grains originated from, and I
Right.
believe to this day they still don't know where these grains ever came from.
No,
They're
there's
there.
no concrete evidence of them.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but they are really, really, really powerful. And so I really started sourcing it to try to find it, and I found somebody with some grains in Cocoa Beach. So I took a drive over there, and they gave me the grains for free,
Mhm.
which was really amazing. And the great thing about the grains is once you have them, as you know, you never have to buy the grains again. They just continue to multiply and multiply and multiply. So it's pretty much just getting the milk. So then, the next step for me was trying to figure out how to make it, going through that process, and that took a good probably 2 to 3 weeks to kind of figure that out. And
Mhm.
then I kind of got that worked out, and I made it to the right consistency, and everything looked good. So then I started taking it. So I know from using the probiotics and the fermented foods that I was definitely putting too much in my body. So I just started with a teaspoon,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, I just took a teaspoon of that and I said, let me slowly introduce it into my body. And at that time, I was lactose intolerant. Every time I drank milk, I would get really sick. My right eye would turn red. My joints would start hurting. I get really tired. So I was definitely allergic to it. But there is a misconception about kefir that if we have dairy allergies, that it's going to cause a problem. But it's really not the case. And an example about milk is a lot of people have the allergies to milk. They go to the grocery store, they buy the milk, they come home, they drink it, they have issues. But also, a lot of people can go to the farm and get fresh milk from the cow and drink it and
Mm-hmm.
digest it fine. So
Yep.
it's just the process of the milks and what happens to them and things like that. But I started taking the kefir, and I started going really slowly. And I was also at the same time, I know I didn't mention this earlier, but I was also at the same time cutting out all the inflammatory foods. So like dairy, wheat, corn, gluten,
Mm-hmm.
processed foods, fast foods, sugar, just pretty much all the common sense things to try to give myself the best chance to heal. And at that time, I started taking the kefir, and 30 minutes later, I kind of just been experimenting and trying to figure something out. So I did come up with a protocol that was really starting to work. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd take the kefir. 30 minutes later, I would take a prebiotic. And the prebiotic was nothing more than just honey and garlic mixed together. And I could really feel that working through my body. And I pretty much just ate to heal my body. I didn't overeat or anything like that. And I was still going through issues. I had blood, I had cramping, I had um, swollen joints. I was still having sweating at night. I was still in the bathroom a lot. But I noticed that my symptoms were getting better. My stomach wasn't hurting as much. That was the first thing. I was going to the bathroom, starting to get better. Um, and then I continued doing that process for a few months, and then every other day I would increase my dosage.
Mm-hmm.
So I pretty much just listened to my body, and everything was going great. And then I increased it, I increased it, I increased it, and then I got up to about half a cup. And by the time I got up to about half a cup, most of my symptoms were already gone, and that was probably in about a 2.5 month period.
Wow. And were you doing anything else other than just the kefir in the morning, and then you said you followed that up about 30 minutes later with your prebiotic drink? Were you doing anything else other than those things?
Well, the prebiotic was really just a teaspoon of honey and garlic.
Okay.
But yeah, what I was doing is I knew that there was a lot of fruits and vegetables I was having problems with, and most people when they have IBD or any type of issues with the gut, there's a lot of foods that we have to try and avoid.
Mhm.
So I was avoiding certain foods I would avoid, but I was eating a pretty decent variety of fruits and vegetables. And what I learned back then is something very interesting. So a lot of people now have gone to a plant-based diet, which is amazing.
Mhm.
But what I've also noticed is that not many people understand why that plant-based diet works for them. So I've asked a lot of people, and I haven't really got too many answers to where people actually knew why it's so good for them. But the fact of the matter is, the fiber that's in the plant-based diet, in your fruits, vegetables, your nuts, your beans, that's
Mhm.
actually the key to our health. Because that fiber isn't just fiber to keep you regular, as we've been kind of led to believe. The doctors always tell us to have fiber, but
Mhm.
they don't really specifically tell us why. So I kind of think maybe they didn't learn this yet. But so the fiber is the only thing that can feed the healthy bacteria in the gut. So
Mhm.
when we take the probiotics and add a surplus of that in with something like kefir slowly, and we support that to allow it to grow with the prebiotic fiber from fruits and vegetables, that really allows the body, the gut to change. So, and that's really the key. And that's pretty much what I did. And I got to the point where all my symptoms were gone. And it was amazing. I was never that healthy in my entire life up to that point. And I was really excited. I felt like I had a new lease on life. I would meet people with Crohn's disease. We'd talk about it. And one day I met a doctor and we were speaking, and he was really impressed and excited. So he asked me to reach out to UCF, and I did, to the medical school. And they invited me for a symposium on Crohn's disease. So I did talk to him about Crohn's, and I talked to him about just overall awareness about
Mhm.
IBD and Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, and just trying to teach them as future doctors what we go through, and
Mhm.
ways to really help people that's outside of the natural, out of the traditional medicine world. And that was really great. So I felt at that time, okay, I did this. I clearly reversed my health. Is it sustainable? I wasn't sure. So that's why I continued to stay on disability. And
Hmm.
I went back to my doctor's office and I was super excited. He's one of the top doctors. When I show him this, as soon as he sees me, he's going to be excited. Like, hey, what happened to Trevor? How'd you get so healthy? Well, I went to go see him and it didn't go the way that I expected. Pretty much, he told me that I got lucky and it was witchcraft and it's
Yeah.
dangerous what I was doing and I needed to leave his office. And I
Wow.
tried to explain to him, like, hey, just take my research and just check it out. Um, you know, take a look at it when you go home and just let me know, let's talk about it. And he didn't want to have anything to do with me. It got to the point where, he threatened me, he's going to call the police on me. So
Hmm.
I left. And it's really disappointing because I had a good relationship with my doctor before I started experimenting on myself. And to this day, I still think he's a good guy. It's just kind of,
Yeah.
it was threatening to him. This guy just comes out of nowhere and says he has a way to treat Crohn's disease. Like it's not possible, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting enough is, um, so I continued working on with helping people and learning some more about it. But I got so healthy, I kind of lost track of my purpose, and I went back into um, my field of work, criminal justice. And
Hmm.
I started working again. I said, okay, now I'm healthy. Now I can go get my life back together, make my money again, and have a great life. So I started working, continue working, and I applied to get off of disability. And it just so happens about 2 weeks later, I didn't know this, and this is why I'm so passionate about Crohn's disease and helping people with Crohn's disease, is that if we've had a surgery before, we have scar tissue that builds up where we get
Hmm.
reconnected at. I never knew that. Nobody told me that. It wasn't anything I even thought about. And then one day I was at work and I just had the worst pain in my entire life, even though I've been through this just as many of you have. And my gut exploded. And 6 hours later, I ended up at the ER, woke up, and I had ostomy. And
Wow.
I was in shock. Like the last thing I'd expect, it was like a nightmare just over again.
Especially having been feeling so good and
Right.
doing
And,
so
I
well.
wasn't having symptoms, I was no blood, I was doing what I want, I didn't have any allergies. So when I woke up, I pretty much asked the doctor, like, what the heck happened? And he said, well, you had the scar tissue build up and it just caused a blockage and it just popped. And I saved your life. And it's kind of been a theme for me. I've almost been killed or died over 20 times in my life. It's just been
Wow.
a crazy life. When I was a kid, I was working in a major theme park here in Orlando, and a
Hmm.
coworker pulled a gun on me and tried to shoot me in the park. Like
Wow.
it's just, yeah, it's just crazy. But when that happened at that point, and I sat in the hospital bed, I realized to myself that I had a purpose, and instead of me being out there helping other people that are going through this and are struggling, I made the mistake of going back and focusing on this American dream when the American dream really is to help people. So
Yeah.
at that point, at that
And what
minute, I
year
made a
was
promise.
this?
This was in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I basically at that point just made a conscious decision that I was going to start just helping people out with Crohn's disease in particular. And I felt like I had my purpose. And my whole life, I really searched for a purpose. And
Hmm.
at that moment, I realized I had my purpose. So, um, that again, that was hard. I had to go back to Florida, come back down here, stay with my parents again. And at this point, I'm older. I want to be independent, but the disease just takes, it just takes a grip of you. Even after the fact, when I was had my disease under control, side effects from the disease years later can still catch up to you. So even though I have a way to help people, explain how the food works to flip the gut biome, I also want to help people that before they go to surgery, and even if they've had surgery, the experience I have now with my ostomy can
Hmm.
greatly help other people who are in the same situation, because there are people out there with ostomy still struggling. And, just even using the ostomy, the hardware and, just dealing with that. So I have much more insight now. And so last year when I recovered, I had a choice to kind of reverse it, and look at that, or stay with the ostomy. And I chose at that time to just keep the ostomy. And, it's something that if I want to get it reversed at some point, I can. But for me now, the, the crazy things is actually helping me understand food even better. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but when you do eat, you can see what's coming out of the bag.
Yeah.
And it
Hmm.
helped, and it's really, 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 really helped me to understand some other things. So just kind of a quick breakdown of how it really works, flipping the gut ecology is, um, we have good and bad bacteria in our gut, and we have a microbiome. You have a microbiome, which is all the germs and bacteria, yeast, fungus, etc., that make up uh, 90% of your DNA inside and outside. So we thought for a long time that the DNA we were born with is pretty much dictated our life. And even the top scientists in the United States, they believe that. And that's why a lot of the medications were developed the way they were developed, based off your DNA and things like that. But what they realized here recently, because of the Human Microbiome Project, is that they were completely wrong. And the human DNA we're born with is only 10% of our DNA as an adult. The other 90% is all these germs, bacteria, and yeast. So that's why I was so successful at being able to flip my gut ecology and my health in general. And now
Hmm.
the top experts in the field, they have come to the conclusion that food is medicine, and not particularly medicine. Medicine is more for traumatic, short term. If you're really sick with Crohn's, go to the hospital, get your
Hmm.
steroids, take your medicine because that will help your flare. But for the long term, some people are very lucky. They can stay on Remicade and Humira for years and they have no
Hmm.
symptoms. But for a majority of people, that's not the case. And they realize that you have to focus on food because it's the best way to do it. But from the scientific community, they're having a hard time applying it to people. The doctors are having a hard time understanding exactly how it works because they're depending on the scientific community. And then we have the functional food people, like myself, that have been able to make it work. So it's really, at this point, it's a matter of just everybody coming together,
Yeah.
sharing their experiences, working with the microbiologists, working with the doctors, saying, hey, we know these strains of healthy bacteria are good for you. And guess what? They're found in kimchi, they're found in sauerkraut, they're found in kefir. It's not just this magic pill that's a prebiotic or probiotic. It's actually food itself. So I think that's kind of where we're heading. But in the next 5 to 10 years, I believe that we'll go to the doctor, they'll check us out and say, okay, you need to go to the pharmacy, go to Walgreens and get, uh, 50 milligrams or, whatever it is of this
Hmm.
certain bacteria. And I
That would
feel
be
like that's where
amazing.
we're going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it would be amazing to
it seems
see it.
so crazy now. It seems crazy to say that, but that's really where it's going because that's what science is showing. And not only are these things good for balancing your gut ecology, the good and bad bacteria, but it has very beneficial byproducts. So it alkalines the body. A lot of people have keto diets or paleo diets or Atkins or gluten free or alkaline diets, and the truth of the matter is, what I learned is that all health starts in the gut. As the father of Western medicine said, all food,
Hippocrates,
yeah,
yeah.
all disease starts in the gut, and he was absolutely right. And the problem we had, and this is really what identified how we become sick in America. So, can you think back to maybe your mom or your grandma? Do you ever remember them like fermenting food back in, when you were a kid or anything? Have you ever seen that, putting it in jars?
I haven't seen it. My grandma mostly did canning, things like that, but I know a lot of past generations, just because I did start to get into it, it really, I found out so much more about, most people's grandmas did ferment things, or they did have
Right.
kefir, they did have raw milk. I think my grandma grew up on raw milk from the cow, so it wasn't that long
Yeah.
ago that these things were
Right.
there.
Right. And what I noticed though, and what I've found is that so over the past 50 years, really, because of society, because of working, because of careers, because of convenience, we got away from eating those foods with the healthy bacteria. Well, the thing is, really, to be honest, they didn't really know the health benefits of preserving it. Like it would create healthy bacteria, but it's just something we did as tradition, in all these
Mhm.
different cultures. and we stayed healthy. And then once we started getting more busy and more busy, we stopped doing that. So over the past, I would say like 30 years, we probably stopped doing that altogether. But on top of that, we're still damaging our bodies, and now we're no longer treating them with the beneficial bacteria. But
Yeah.
we are eating a plant-based diet where more people are doing that. But the thing is, if you're not adding that healthy bacteria, you're really just working with the bacteria pretty much that you got there, and it's not really expanding and getting, building that ratio to where it needs to be in the best possible way. So, and then you combine stress, and it makes it,
Hmm.
very, very difficult.
I think we take for granted how much of a role food does play in our health because society now has just become, well, if I get sick, I'll go to a doctor and I'll get a pill. And we now have this mindset that it doesn't matter what we put in, but it really does. And I think a lot of the more I talk with people who do have IBD, I think a lot of us with, fighting the inflammatory bowel diseases, we do understand and we do recognize how important the food is that we choose to eat is
Yeah.
to our health and how it makes us feel. I think we're a lot more attuned to that concept because what we eat really does matter. So
Oh, it's so
it's amazing
crucial.
how far we've gotten away from that.
We really
Tell
have,
me tell me a little bit of what your diet looks like now that you've been using these fermented foods for a while. You started with the kefir, started drinking that. What does your diet look like now?
Okay, so pretty much my diet, it's very, it has a lot of similarities to the keto, but
Mhm.
there's no diet that I follow because what I found is that in order for your body to operate at its, maximum effectiveness is you have to be feeding the gut biome. And a lot of diets uh, out there do have fruits and vegetables, right? But so that's great because it feeds the healthy bacteria in the gut and it helps support a healthy microbiome. But what it's missing is the healthy bacteria itself getting added to the body, and that's really the key. So what I do is I eat a very diverse diet. I don't eat a lot of meat. Fish, I do like fish, and I do recognize the benefits of fish, but because of the sourcing for fish, I just really don't trust it. To be honest with you, if I don't pull the fish out the ocean, I won't eat it.
Mhm.
Pretty much, and that really sucks. A lot of the stuff in the grocery store, it's not, So we want milk, but we go to the grocery store, but it's not milk. It's a milk-like
Yeah.
product,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much what's going on at the grocery store. So what I try to do is I actually buy most of my groceries from alternative places. Like I'll get it from a farmer's market, or I'll get it from uh, like a co-op or things like that. I'll go to the Oriental store. I'll go to the European store. I'll go
Mhm.
to the Middle Eastern store, and I'll go to the grocery store to get things like water. Things that you can't get at those places. That's really the key, is to buy the right food. And it's so hard because for the most part, everybody sees social media and they see all these things and it's great ideas and this thing is good and that's great, but when you get to the grocery store, and that's when the real business goes down. You have to decide, okay, I saw that, am I going to get celery because I've seen celery juicing is the new craze? Okay,
Mhm.
am I going to get this kefir, this Lifeway kefir? I know this is good. And you're pretty much going to the grocery store and just having to figure it out when you get there. So
Yeah.
and that's what kind of makes it hard. But for my diet, what I'm eating is kefir is a staple of my diet. Um, and one thing I try to teach people is that it's very hard to eat clean all the time. And I don't believe there's many people out there that eat 100% clean because it's just so hard to do.
Yeah.
So what I try to tell people is once you get your gut ecology fixed, you can eat whatever you want in moderation as long as you take care of your gut biome. And a lot of people will just stick to the foods that help them get healthy. They don't really go back. But if I want to have like a steak, I recently cut meat out, but if I wanted to have a steak, I'd eat a steak. Even if I wanted some McDonald's, I know it sounds crazy, but if I
Mhm.
wanted some McDonald's once in a blue moon, I'd eat it because I believe that if you're taking care of your body, you are allowed to cheat a little bit. If you're trying to heal your body, you can't cheat at all because you have to get to that point to have that luxury. But
Mm-hmm.
I eat a lot of healthy fats, a lot of diverse, plant-based, diverse, fermented foods. So I'll do kimchi, I'll do fermented carrots, I'll do um, uh, yogurt. So one of my favorite foods in the world, it's Siggy's yogurt. Are you familiar with them?
No, I'm not.
Okay, well, Siggy's is Icelandic yogurt, and the Icelandic yogurt is great because that actually comes straight from the Vikings. That recipe, and the reason the Vikings were so much bigger than everybody because when they were doing fermented milk, they were creating it in such a way that it created 3 to 4 times the protein. So that's why they were
Mm,
so big, which is really interesting.
that
Um,
is.
so that's why I use Siggy's, and that's when I talk to people and suggest foods, I always suggest that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't, I really don't have any sugar. I'll never go into like the sugar and grab sugar and put it into anything.
Yep.
Um, but I eat pretty clean for the most part. I don't have anything extreme. I will do intermittent fast, and I found that's amazing for the body.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And another major thing is pretty much the water. Testing the water that you're drinking, even if you're getting like water from the store. Let's say you go to 7-Eleven every day for your lunch break and you grab a bottle of water. Do some research to make sure that you're getting good water because even if it says pH balance, it's not necessarily, pH balance. Not to pick on Coke and Pepsi or anything, but Aquafina and Dasani are two of the worst waters you can put in your body, and you can look that up, test it at your home yourself. So water is really crucial. So I try to make sure I get good water in my body.
Do you have a water that you recommend?
If you're just grabbing water, I would just grab like Zephyr Hills.
Mm-hmm.
That's alkaline water. That's decent. Even your tap water, believe it or not, I know the tap water gets takes a beating. That's
Mm-hmm.
fluoride and this and that, but that is actually a better option for you in most cities than the water from the store. So you really got to do your research on water in your area and where you're at. There are machines that are really good to help get the best pure water that you can have also.
Mm-hmm.
But I do make sure that I get my vitamins, my minerals, and all my foods. I don't take any type of supplements. I don't believe in taking a vitamin because you get all that in food.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and other than that, I probably have a very similar diet to you, except for I eat more fermented foods, most likely, and I drink kefir, and things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've gotten away from a lot of my ferments and I've been feeling like I need to add them back in, but kind of like you mentioned earlier, it's hard to go slowly with food sometimes. And so
I know it
I find
is.
myself I'll go to the store and I'll buy a bag of raw fermented sauerkraut and I think, well, I used to eat this all the time and I eat a big cup of it because I love it. And then it's like, well, that
Yeah,
was a
it's
bad
so good.
idea.
It's only good. Yeah, I
So,
know. That is really the challenge, and when we're sick and we're healing our bodies and we have an idea that we have this thing that's just gold in our hands. No, we
mhm.
just want to it's hard to go slow. And I've had
Yeah.
experiences with many people with the kefir, for example. Now, I tell people go slow, go slow, go slow, slow wins the race with this stuff, fermented foods and the drinks. And I've had a lot of people, I would say a lot of people, I've had a handful of people that accelerated the process. And I know now from experience that if you're sick and you get real kefir that you make with the grains, and you don't start slow and you start with like a glass of it, you're gonna go to the
Mhm.
ER. You're gonna end up in the ER. You'll be in there for a couple of days. You'll be so sick, feel like you have the worst stomach ache, food poisoning, and you're just flooding your body with so much healthy bacteria. It's just you're drowning it. So
Yeah. I think it's amazing. It's interesting that you said you started with just a teaspoon of it. I think that really puts it into perspective for how
yeah,
powerful these foods are. And if you are going to start trying this, to really, really go slow and
really go
start
slow.
building
And then
yourself.
exactly. Build yourself up. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me as well, and they really want to try this. But now we have more people that are cruelty free, and
Hmm.
they won't touch dairy at all. So I understand that, and I really don't want to leave anybody out. I want to find a way to help everybody because that's the goal. And I don't care if you don't have money and what it is. I'll find a way to help you. And I've been there, and I know what it's like.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about your passion and desire to help because obviously you mentioned earlier that you've found a purpose with this. You're definitely very passionate. I think the people listening can hear that, and it's wonderful. So, tell me a little bit about Crohn's Crusaders and how you started that, and where you're going, what you have in store. I know you've got the book. It sounds like should be coming out. So, tell me about all these things you have going on, how you're helping, and what's coming up.
Okay, so currently what I'm doing is I'm really just trying to get the information out there to the public. I'm starting on Instagram first. Um, I'm really hesitant with Facebook just because it's Facebook, and we kind of know how Facebook dealing with Facebook is in general. But I
Hmm.
feel like for this type of stuff, Instagram is really good. And I just kind of started it slow on there, just building the audience up and teaching people about this. And what's really great is I also Uber, and
Hmm.
I found that Ubering, I meet so many people, especially
Hmm.
with Crohn's disease and different issues like that. And that's another way that I've been able to connect with people, and that's really helped me grow Crohn's Crusaders a lot.
That's awesome.
So what? Yeah, it's been amazing. So what Crohn's Crusaders really is, it's for people that have Crohn's and IBD, and that have been struggling. And what I want to do is show them that yes, we've thought our entire lives that our only hope is to manage our symptoms, but a lot of times people feel like the doctors are taking advantage of us and things like that. But now, as I've you know got past a lot of my anger that I had in the beginning after being able to heal myself, having parts of me removed, almost dying numerous times, like having my life just struggle. What I realized is it's not really the doctor's fault. They just don't know about this stuff. They've spent their whole entire careers, their entire schooling learning about how to manage symptoms. So
Hmm.
what I really want to focus on is just really teaching people, and the main thing is reaching out to the people that are suffering with stomach issues, because they do have these stats out there, and I don't really believe a lot of the stats and the information that's out there, to be honest with you, because they say only about 2 to 3 million people suffer from
Hmm.
stomach issues, IBD, in the United States. Well, a majority of the people are eating. Majority of us are just eating unhealthy, and I believe the
Hmm.
numbers are way higher than that. And if we continue like this, we're gonna have a huge health epidemic, because we went from eating fast food and processed foods as a kind of like a treat to having them pretty much be a main part of our diet now. And the
Yeah.
way it's going is, if we continue like this, it's going to be really hard to reverse this and get our health back. So that's
Yeah.
kind of one of my major things, is teaching people about health, helping anybody who needs help with Crohn's disease, IBD, anything in the GI tract. A lot of times when we're really sick, we don't have resources. We don't have people that can help us. Our finances are usually off, and we just can't afford things. So I want to make sure that if there's people out there who are struggling with their money situation, that they can reach out to me, and I will help them. And that's kind of a main thing, is just trying to get to everybody with Crohn's, IBD, and help them before they have to have surgery, and their life will change, dramatically from that point on.
Hmm. That's fantastic. So tell me about Crohn's Crusaders secrets. Is that down the road once you've kind of been able to gather more information and do a little bit more and start putting all of this into a book? Is that your goal?
Yeah, so basically, I have written the book. I actually wrote it about 4.5 months ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and it's been going through to the publisher and editor. It's gone through some doctors. It's gone back and forth, and where we're at now is I just kind of streamlined it a little bit. It's going to be the introduction to gut health and Crohn's Crusaders. It's going to be, if you read this, you will be able to significantly help your health. If you're struggling with Crohn's, I'll show you exactly what happened to me. A lot of the stuff we talked about, it's in there. There's more specific stuff in there. But it's kind of an introductory to um, healing your body if you have Crohn's disease or any type of gastrointestinal issue in general.
Hmm.
That should be out, I would say, within a month. I'm hoping it should be out. And what I'm really trying to do is set up kind of like um, conference calls, not conference calls, but one-on-one coaching calls, and
Hmm.
different videos and things like that. I want to show people how to make the fermented foods at home. I want to carry a line of fermented foods. And something I'm also working on right now is I am setting up a network of people like myself that have gone through their struggles with health and have been able to heal themselves, but in different areas. So I have people that are specialists in gut health. Somebody who, that would be me. And let's have somebody who's specialist in plant-based foods, the different areas, essential oils, hormonal things, all the different things, and have us as a group, as a network where if somebody says, hey, I'm suffering from this, well, we're going to have a plan for you for your overall health based on all of our experiences. So I know that if you're sick, you're suffering from Crohn's disease, I can make you feel better. But what if we can have a way to make you feel better that's more integrative with all of the natural health, herb, stress reduction, just a more
Hmm.
well-rounded approach, because I believe that, even if I have something that works, we can always make it better. And I
Yeah.
want to always continue on this, continually improve on this. So it just becomes much easier for people to get better. And that's really the goal, is to have a bunch of people with the same ideas and the kind of the same um, attitude and passion for health as myself work together to kind of make a big difference in the community. And I know it sounds funny to say, but I believe that we can make a big difference in the world just putting this information out
Hmm.
there and teaching people specifically how you get healthy and how you can control your health.
I agree. And so awesome. I'm really excited to hear all the things that you're planning to do and what you've got lying ahead in the future.
Thank
I
you.
think that's going to be absolutely fantastic. And I know I'm looking forward to your book coming out and reading more about it. But I love the gut microbiome. I
It's amazing.
love thinking about what it's going to become in the next 5, 10 years, and
Oh,
really hoping to see the integrated approach, just like you're talking about. How can we combine conventional medicine and nutritional wisdom, and how can we
right.
combine all these things to really create that big picture? I think it's fascinating and it's wonderful and it's needed.
It is. What's really also amazing, I know I didn't touch on this too much, but it's really connected to our whole body. There's a gut skin
Hmm.
axis, there's a gut brain axis, there's a gut muscle axis. Like, for example, some I'll just throw out there. If people work out and you take a post workout shake, we've been under this assumption we can only absorb about 20, 25 grams of protein. But there's so much more stuff out there that we're learning now, and it's amazing as we continue to learn more what we'll be able to do. But here's an example: if you drink some kombucha after you work out, right before you take your protein shake, you're gonna absorb much more protein, much more um, nutrients. Like, for example, you can absorb up to
Hmm.
125% more glutamine, more BCAA. So I found this is a specific way to hack the body when we're trying to get into fitness, build muscles,
Hmm.
get stronger faster. And also, something that's kind of coming out right now is that you can lose significant fat by having a healthy lifestyle with these foods in it. And it's something that it's definitely a performance enhancer, but it's legal and it's healthy. And I think in the future, instead of taking these dangerous pills and injections and whatever they're doing to cheat, they'll actually just turn to food, because with
Yeah.
food, there's really no limit.
It's fantastic. Well, we've talked about your Instagram and Crohn's Crusaders, so why don't you go ahead and tell people exactly where they can find you online?
Oh, absolutely. So, if you do want a copy of the book, you can go to crohnscrusaders.com and sign up. You'll get updates on the book when it's coming out, some different information like that. You can also go to Instagram, like we were talking about, Crohn's Crusaders. The movement is growing now, and I will be on different platforms. I will have Twitter coming soon, and some different social media as it grows. So right now, if you want to get a hold of me, you can reach out to me on Instagram, and you can direct message me, and I will respond to you. And if you're struggling right now with your health and you're curious about the microbiome, you can reach out to me. I'll send you research on it and studies, whatever you need. And if you do need help with it, I will help you, like I help everybody. And it doesn't matter, what your situation is. My goal is to get you better. And, for me, that's priceless.
It definitely is. And Trevor, thank you so much for giving such a great overview and for sharing so much information about the gut
Absolutely.
microbiome today and for also sharing your own story. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have an IBD story, either as a patient or a family member that you'd like to share as a guest on this podcast, or if you have a topic you'd like to hear about, send me an email at crohnsfitnessfood@gmail.com. If you'd like to learn more about me and my Crohn's journey, follow me on Instagram using @crohnsfitnessfood, or visit my blog for in-depth articles about my struggles and victories with Crohn's through diet, fitness, and lifestyle at www.crohnsfitnessfood.com. And finally, remember, be strong, be grateful, and be the warrior that you are.